When I go into Excel, notice how I'm into the student file. So hopefully you've downloaded that from the chat window. And if you click on the student file, it'll bring it into Excel and it'll look like this. Now, everybody, this is not a beginner's class in Excel. I hope you know your way around the Excel spreadsheet so we don't have to spend a lot of time, with the basics. I hope that's the case. Otherwise, this class isn't going to make a whole lot of sense for you. All right, so now this spreadsheet does have a lot of sheets in there. So if you follow my mouse, sometimes I'll make my mouse do that so you can find my mouse. Come down here and click on this arrow pointing to the right, and you'll be able to scroll the sheets to the right. Or click on the arrow pointing to the left, and you'll be able to scroll the sheets to the left. Or you can right-click on that arrow. Right-click, and then you see a list of all the sheets. They're not in alphabetical order. They're in the order they appear in the workbook. So I want you to scroll down on the sheets, and let's find the sheet that's called Pivot Table Data. The sheet is called Pivot Table Data, and I'll click on OK. And it should look like this. Notice how the field names are up top, so we can call those column headings or the field names. Either the pivot table or the Power Query or the Power Pivot always likes the data to have the field names to be up top. And then scroll down to the bottom and notice how there's no blank rows until the bottom. Now this could be thousands and thousands of rows. You want that to be continuous with no blank rows until the bottom and no blank columns until the right-hand side. So I'm sure we all have data like that. Let's go back to the top. It's very important that the field names are at the top there. So these are airline transactions, so each row is a different flight. Let's make our first pivot table. Click on one cell that's not blank. Pick on the Insert menu up top, Insert, and we'll come over here and we'll pick on Pivot Table, Insert Pivot Table. Now usually on this window, I don't have to change anything. Usually it has the proper data range. This one does. And usually it'll be on a new worksheet. So I'm going to click on OK. Now let me show you what happened. We were on a sheet that was called Pivot Table Data, but we asked for a new sheet. So now I'm on sheet 1 or the next available sheet. Okay? But the data still comes from the sheet that's called Pivot Table Data. Notice how you have your field names on the right-hand side. That's why I kept on saying it was so important to have the field names on the top of the data, because the pivot table does use this. Really, we're just going to move these fields to these different sections. So pick up the office field and drag it down here into the rows. And then you see over here all the rows are a different office. So the pivot table is really over here on the left-hand side. We're just building a pivot table over on the right. Now, none of these sections are required. However, usually you have something in the columns as well. So I'm going to scroll down on the fields, pick up the word airline, and drag airline into the columns like that. And now we start to see our grid coming together. Now to put some numbers in your pivot table, you're going to move something into the value section. Usually you'll have some kind of number field in the value section. So I'll pick up total, and I'll drag it to the values. Good. And now we have our pivot table, okay? So I think it really gives you a lot of information. I have a cross-reference for each office for each airline. I have row totals on the right, column totals, and grand totals, all right? So, you just kind of practice moving your fields around, and you'll get different pivot tables. So pick up the word airline from the columns and drag it to the rows. See how each office is then broken into the airlines that way. So, you can move your fields to the different sections. When a section has more than one field like that, then it takes it in the top-down order. Notice how office is first and then airline is second. Let's switch it. Pick up the word office from the rows and drag it below the airline. And now see how American is broken down into the offices. So the order of the fields does matter. It's going to take it top down. A lot of this course, everybody, will be about changing calculations or adding new calculations. So notice over here it says sum of total, right? So these are all sums. So watch what we're going to do. Come over here to the right. Everybody, you can, now we should all be at the same area. So notice where I am. I'm in the value section. pick on the pull down where it says sum of total, and I'll pick on value field settings right there. And now we have sum, count, average, minimum, maximum, product, standard deviation, and variance. Pretty soon I'll show you where there's more beyond that. So pick in the word count. Now you see up here where it says custom name, whatever you put into the custom name will show up over here on the pivot table. So change the custom name to the word count. And then click on OK. Notice now we have counts instead of sums. So I have a different pivot table, right? Watch how we did that one again. That's kind of an important one. Now I want you to realize, everybody, everything that we do in the normal pivot table, you'll be able to do in the power pivot as well. Now the power pivot can do some things that the normal pivot table cannot do, but everything we can do in the normal pivot table can be done in the power pivot. Come over here and click on this pull down where it says count, and I'll pick on value field settings again. Let's go back to the word sum. And then up here for the custom name, change that to the word sum. And then click on OK. And now we have sums again. So what if you want to see the sum and a count at the same time? Well, then you would just move another field into the value section. So pick up the total field from here. Pick up total and drag it into the values like that. Good. If you notice how you have redundant numbers because we have two sums. Well, I would like to change one of those into a count. So notice where my mouse is going to go. Pick on the second sum on the right-hand side. Pick on that second sum. Go back to value field settings. And now we're back to here. I'll pick on the word count, and I'll change this to the word count as well for the custom name. And I'll click on OK. So now we have a sum and a count for each different office and airline combination. Now, for those of you that have worked with pivot tables before, you probably know about sum and count. Let me show you where there's other calculations beyond that. Maybe you don't know about these. So come over here and click on that word count again in the value section. Click on count. And pick on value field settings. And we're back to here. I want you to pick on the word sum. Now follow my mouse and pick on the second tab of this window. See the second tab? Click that, please. And then if you click on this pull down, you get more calculations. So you should look through those. There's some pretty good ones in there. So I'll choose % of column total. And then come up here for the custom name and change that to say % of total. So if I pick on the first tab of this window, I get things like sum, count, and average. But if I pick on the second tab right there, then you click on the pull down, then you'll have more calculations available. So we'll choose % of column total, and then click on OK. Notice now we have percents in our pivot table, right? So you can keep on adding more fields to each of these different sections to help you grow your pivot table. Now, what if I wanted to remove the % of total? Well, come over here, pick up the word % of total, and just drag it back to your fields. So you can easily go back and forth just by dragging the fields back and forth to the different sections. Let's see how we can sort the pivot table. So let's say, a lot of people would say, can we sort it by the grand total? So watch what I'm going to do. Right-click on one of those numbers on the grand total column, right-click, pick in the word sort, and then I'll say sort largest to smallest. And then you can see, let's see, Minneapolis had the highest number going down from there. So you can sort on any column. You would just right-click on the number on the column that you want to sort, and you pick on sort. Okay? Now follow my mouse over here, everybody. Click on this pull down where it says row labels. Then you can sort and filter the office. And click on the pull down over here where it says column labels. And then you can sort and filter the airlines. So that kind of helps you get started with the normal pivot tables. That was a good review. Everybody click on the pivot table over here. Notice when you pick on the pivot table, you get 2 extra menus up top. Now it says pivot table analyze. A couple years ago, it just said the word analyze there. So hopefully you have something that says analyze or pivot table analyze. And then you also have the design menu when you click on the pivot table. Let's pick on pivot table analyze right there. And then pick on fields, items, and sets. Notice how the calculated item is not available right now. Here's what you want to do. You want to pick on one of the headings. So pick on the word Southwest, or you can pick on one of the headings on the side. So I'll pick on the word Southwest there. Now pick on fields, items, and sets. And notice now the calculated item is lit up. So for that one, you have to click on one of the headings like we just did. Go with calculated item, please. And then pick on calculated item. And now that one should be available. And now we should have this screen. Remember a few years ago when American merged with US Air? Well, we're going to make a combination of that. So for the name, type in the word merged value. Just type it in, please. Now you see on the formula where it says equals 0. Let's get rid of that 0, but keep the equal sign. You want to keep the equal sign there. Now come over here, double click on the word American. That shows up in the formula. Type in the plus sign and double click on US Air. So it says American plus US Air. And it's going to be called the merged value. Of course, it could be a much bigger formula. It's just an example, right? Go ahead and click on OK. And now notice how we have the merged value. So that was called a calculated item. To make that one light up, you have to click on one of the headings, either on the headings at the top or on the side, and then I would pick on fields, items, and sets, and there's the calculated item. Click on one of these numbers. This time, pick on fields, items, and sets. Notice how the calculated field is lit up. So go ahead and pick on calculated field, please. And you get this window. So I'll type in sales tax for the name. We're going to get rid of that 0, but keep the equal sign. Double click on the word total right here. Notice how the word total is in the formula, and then your math is the same after that. So I'll say times 0.07, and I'm using the asterisk for multiplication. So I live over here in New Jersey where we have 7% sales tax. So it says equals total times 0.07. We're using the field name instead of the cells. Go ahead and click on OK. Notice how we have a new column that's called sales tax. Now for that one, notice how that one lands over here among your fields. So I can use that like any other field. Watch again how we're going to add a calculated field onto our pivot table. Come up here, pick on fields, items, and sets, and pick on calculated field. Notice how the ones that are called sets are not lit up yet. As far as I know, they only light up when you do a power pivot, which we'll get to later on today. So we'll see those light up later on. So I'll pick on calculated field. Good. Let's call this one line total. We're going to get rid of that 0, but keep the equal sign. Double click on the word total right there. Double click. That'll put that into the formula. Type in the plus sign. Now scroll down on this list and double click on sales tax. So the formula says equals total plus the sales tax. You're using your field names in the formula, otherwise the math is the same. So I'll click on OK. And now I have the line total. Let's see if the math is right. 398 plus 28 is 426. Looks like the math is right. Now notice how those fields wind up over here among your fields. So I can use those like any other field. In fact, go ahead and uncheck it where it says sales tax and uncheck it where it says line total. That'll remove it from the pivot table, but now we can use those like any other fields. So that was called a calculated field. All right, so follow my mouse Move your mouse towards that word sum in the corner. And when your mouse is on the word sum, you should have a black cross like that. So click on the the black arrow. Click on the black arrow, and then the whole pivot table is selected. And then we'll do the normal conditional formatting from there. So in this case, I'll pick on the home menu, home. I'm going to pick on conditional formatting. We're going to say highlight cells and then greater than. Okay, conditional formatting, highlight cells, and then greater than. And let's say, how about 4,000? I'll type in 4,000 here. And you would pick a format over here. I'll pick on red. And when I click on OK, clearly anything that's over 4,000 is now in red. So the point of that page was to show that conditional formatting does work with the pivot table. Now, everybody, this workbook has a lot of sheets. So follow my mouse down here to the corner and right-click on that arrow. See it? Right-click on that arrow. And you see a list of all the sheets. Let's scroll back to the top and pick on 2014. The sheet name is called 2014. And then click on OK. All right, notice how this is laid out as the company budget for 2014. Click on 2015, and we have the company budget there. And then click on 2016, and we have the company budget there. All right? So you can see how they're laid out in a similar way, right? Now let's go to the sheet that's called Consolidate right next to it. Right now this sheet is blank, but my intention is to make a pivot table that'll come from those three other sheets. On the Consolidate sheet, pick on cell A3. On the bottom row of your keyboard, press the Alt key. Just press it, you don't have to hold it down. Then press the letter D, then press the letter P. And now I have the pivot table wizard. This is the way we built our pivot table a long, long time ago. But now it's real useful for that multiple consolidation ranges, which means we can make the pivot table come from multiple sheets. So pick on multiple consolidation ranges, and I'll pick on next. Yes, I can repeat that. Watch what I'm going to do. On the bottom row of your keyboard, I'll press the Alt key. Then press the letter D, and then press the letter P. So I'm on the Consolidate sheet, and I'll pick on cell A3. So again, I'll press the Alt key, and the letter D, and the letter P. And now you got the pivot table wizard. On this screen, make sure you pick on multiple consolidation ranges, and I'll pick on next. On this window, pick on next. So, Jessica, do you have this kind of window? Is that what you have, Jessica? Yes. Good. So pick on this space where it says range. Now come over here and pick on sheet 2014. And then watch what I'm going to highlight. I want to highlight from A3 to I9. A3 to I9. And then come over here and pick on the word add, everybody. And now that should be in the all ranges area. Then it gets easier after that. Come down here and pick on sheet 2015. And it picks the same range, which is correct, because they're laid out in the same way. So pick on add. And now they're both in the all ranges area. And then pick on sheet 2016 and pick on add. And now they're all in the all ranges area. So you would do that for as many sheets as you want to add up, and you pick on add after each one. And now we're basically done with this wizard. Pick on next, and then pick on finish. This pivot table actually came from the accumulation of the three sheets. That's a pretty powerful one right there. We were able to make the pivot table for multiple sheets. Now later on today, we'll do a pivot table for multiple sheets kind of in a different way. It's going to join the sheets together on a common field when we get to the power pivot. I want to show you the data that we'll be using for the rest of the class here. So go ahead and right click on this arrow again. Right click. Go to the top of the list of the sheets and pick on Customer List, and then click on OK. Notice how this one is not a formatted table, but it has the field names up top. So even though it's not a formatted table, I'll be able to pull that data into the Power Query. Now go to a sheet that's called Order List. Notice how that one is also not a formatted table, but it has the field names up top. So I'll be able to pull that into the Power Query. And let's go to a different sheet. I'm going to right click on this arrow. I'm going to scroll down and I'll pick on the word suppliers and I'll click on OK. Notice how this is a formatted table. In fact, if we go to the next couple of sheets after that, they're all formatted tables. So that's the data that we'll be using for the rest of the class. Let's go ahead and close this window for the Excel spreadsheet. And we can save that Excel spreadsheet. If you didn't save it, it's okay, as long as we have that original data. Let's go back into Excel this time, and this time we'll use a blank workbook. All right, so I'm going to go into Excel, and I want to go to a blank workbook. Okay, good. So everybody, it started in Excel 2013. So if you have an earlier edition, which I don't think that you do, based on what you said before, I think we'll be okay. So let's pick on the data menu. And then over here we say get data. So if you have data and then get data, that's what I'll be using today. If you don't have the word get data here, look for something over here that says, I think it said make a new query or something about a query. And that'll be where you can pull the data in. All right. So you should have at least one of those. Pick on the word get data. Let's see some of the different data sources that we could use in the Power Query. So if I say from file, I could do from an Excel workbook, a text or a CSV file, XML, JSON, our data sources on the internet. PDF, I wouldn't really use a PDF unless that's the only thing that you have, because it's going to be inconsistent results. But I guess you could use a PDF, or I can do SharePoint. Let's go back over here and pick on database. So there I have SQL Server, Access, and lots of other databases. Oh, I'm going to show you a couple of those. We could do Microsoft Azure. Online services includes SharePoint, Microsoft Exchange, Microsoft Dynamics, Salesforce. A few weeks ago, Facebook used to be there, but maybe there was some kind of issue with Facebook, so that's not there anymore. So, they're always changing things. Come over here and pick on from other sources, and then I have SharePoint and some others. These two are catch-all categories. Most databases can fall into one of those categories. So you can see that it can work with just about any kind of data, right? So let's start to pull some data in using the Power Query. So everybody, I'm going to pick on the data menu. We should be on a blank workbook. And then I'll pick on get data, and I'll say from file. And I'll say from workbook, from an Excel workbook. Let's go back into our student file. Mine's on my desktop. Yours is probably in the download folder. So I'll pick on the word desktop, and I'll pick on student file. And I'll pick on import. It's going to try to open up that Excel workbook using the Power Query. Okay. These are the sheets of that workbook. These are the sheets. Scroll down about halfway down, and we'll find one that's called Customer List. Click on Customer List. Remember, that was the one that was not the formatted table. So notice how it has field names like column 1 and column 2 and column 3. I mean, I guess you can work with those, but those are really hard to work with. So watch what we're going to do. If it's not a formatted table from Excel, you have to do this next step. Come down here and pick where it says transform data, or in the older versions it would say the word edit there. So pick on transform data or edit. And now you'll actually be in the window that's called Power Query. Good. Now there's lots of things that we'll do today in the Power Query, but come over here and click where it says use the first row as headers. Click that, please. And now you'll have the much better field names. Okay? We'll do a lot with the Power Query today. We'll come back to that. For now, let's come over here and pick on the disk where it says close and load. And now that's the way it'll appear in the Excel workbook. Good. Now, oh yes, I chose the customer list sheet. And I chose, if you scroll down about halfway down, you'll see when it's called customer list. And then make sure you pick where it says transform data so you can remove those column headings. Do you see what I mean by that? Yes, okay, good. And then once you're done with that, pick on close and load. So everybody, no matter what the data source is, it's going to make it, the Power Query will make it into one of these formatted tables. The real significance of that is that when it's a formatted table, then it can be used in the Power Pivot. So you'll be able to pull your data in with the Power Query, and then it's going to make it into formatted tables, which then can be used in the Power Pivot later on today. Let's try that again. Let's go get the other one that's not a formatted table. So I'll pick on the Data menu. I'll pick on Get Data. This time say From File, and we'll say From Workbook. Once again, point to your student file. Yours is probably on your download folder, and mine's in the desktop folder. And I'll click on Import. These are the sheets. So let's scroll down. This time I want to find the sheet that's called Order List, okay? That was the other one that was not a formatted table, Order List. Notice how it has those field names, column 1, column 2. They're really hard to work with. So let's come over here and pick on Transform Data. And then the important choice is going to be over here. Click where it says Use First Row as Headers. Now we have the much better field names. And then come over here and pick on Close and Load. And now that's the way it's going to appear in the Excel spreadsheet. Now everybody on mine, the first one made sheet 11 and the second one made sheet 12. I don't care about the sheets. I don't care what sheet that you have. See, over here, you get the, I can pick on the customer list or the order list. For the rest of the class, I'm not going to refer to the sheets at all. I don't care what sheets that you have because I can get to them over here on the right-hand side when we use the Power Query. Okay, so just realize that. Anyway, there's the order list. So as we go through this afternoon, I'll show you other data types that we can use, not just Excel. That was just, kind of to get us started there. Let's start with that customer list. Go back to the customer, just click on it, and then you can see the customers over here. Now, everybody, there's a couple ways I can go back into the Power Query. If you move your mouse to the word customer list, you get this white window, and then on the white window, I can pick on Edit over here, or you can pick on the Query menu up top, Query, and then I can pick on the word Edit over there, or I can right-click on the customer list, right-click, and then pick on the word Edit there, and then now we're in the Power Query. So either one of those methods will bring it back into the Power Query. So lots of things we can do here. Let's do something that we can all use. So take a look at that contact name column. Notice how the contact name has the first name and the last name. Well, I would like to split that. In normal Excel, that would be called text to columns. Here, it's just called split columns. I think it's a more common sense name. So pick on contact name, and then come up here and pick on split column. Usually it's by a delimiter, which in this case will be the space. Now it'll probably find the space, and it does. All right, so if it found that it was a space, and then click on OK. And now we have the first name and the last name, right? So that was just called split column. It was nice and easy. I'm going to give that a better name. So I'm going to right-click on Contact Name 1, and I'll pick on Rename. I'll call that one First Name. Good. I'm going to right-click where it says Contact Name 2, and I'll rename that one to Last Name. Good. So anyway, you see split column is there. I think it's even easier than it is in Excel. So let's say you split that. And then somebody in a different department says, oh, in our department, we like to have it where the field names are together. Can you put those back together again? Sure, no problem. So watch. I'm going to click on the first name, hold down your shift key, and pick on the last name so that they're selected like that. Now, in Excel, to put those together, it will be called a concatenate. Like what is it called? It's called concatenate. What does that even mean? Well, here it's called merge column. I think it has a more common sense name. I want to make a new column from here. So watch. Pick on the word add column. And then come up here and pick on merge columns. It just has a common sense name, merge. Okay, that makes sense to me. Click on merge. This time we want to add the space back in again. So click on this pull down where it says separator, and then I'll pick on the space. And let's call the new column contact name. Now everybody, if you scroll to the right, then we should have a new column that's called contact name. So in the Power Query, there's many ways to manipulate the data. First, we split it with split column, and then we put it back together with merge column. All right? Let's go ahead and save that. Oh, by the way, go through the different menus up there, and you see a lot of good choices. You know what I'm not seeing? I'm not seeing the word undo anywhere. Even on the quick access toolbar, I don't see undo. So let me show you how you would undo something. You come over here to the right. Now we don't really have to do it here. I'm just trying to show you what you would do. You would pick on one of those steps and right click on it and then delete that step. Or you delete it until the end. That actually undoes, I almost said undoes it. That actually does an undo, which at that point, you would take it from there. So you right click on one of those steps, either delete it or delete it until the end. That really does the undo, which at that point, you can take it from there. All right, so make sure you see that section over on the right. Let's pick on close and load on the top. And now that's the way the Excel spreadsheet will look as well. Now, if you get this message, I have it also. Just click on OK. Usually it just goes right away, and it'll be fine. Good. Let's see some other things we can do in the Power Query. So go ahead and right click on the order list this time. Right click and pick on the word edit. And now we're back into the Power Query. Here's one I like a lot. You see how we have the order date and the required date and the ship date? Well, those are going to be date fields. Watch how easily we can calculate an age based on a date field. To do it in Excel, the formula is kind of complicated, but here it's built right in. So pick on the column that's called order date. I want to make a new column from that column. So come up here and pick on add column. You see? It knows that that's a date field. So pick on date. Now you can isolate the year part or even the start of the year, the beginning of the year, the end of the month, the quarter, the week. So you have all these great features that are built right in. But then notice what's also built right in, the age. Pick on the word age. Now this is the number of days. Sometimes you want the number of days if it's like an aging report, but let's get the number of years. Watch what I'm going to do. Go ahead and right click where it says age. Pick on the word transform, and we'll do total years. Now it's in years. I like to round that off. So right click on the word age, pick in the word transform, and we're going to say round it, and we'll say round it down. All right? And now we were able to get the age pretty quickly. So that's one that's built right in when it's a date field. I like that feature. Let's do some more with the Power Query. If I scroll to the right of the age field, I see a lot of these blank columns. I like to get rid of some of those. So scroll over until you can see column 16. It should be next to the order amount. Pick on column 16, hold down your shift key, scroll over to the right and pick on this column that's called 7-1. Now all those columns should be selected. You can lift your fingers now, and then right-click on that, and then say Remove Columns. And now all those columns are gone. Good. So lots of good things we could do here in the Power Query. Here I'm actually back still in the Power Query. So I would like to take, let's see, I want to add the order amount plus the freight. So watch how we're going to add a new calculation into the Power Query. We're going to add a new column. So pick on Add Column. To make your own formula, you'll say Custom Column. Pick on Custom Column right there. Good. Now you'll get this window. For the field name, let's call it a new total. Come over here to the right and scroll down, and I'll double click on the freight field. Notice how that puts that into the formula. Type in your plus sign. Now scroll down and double click on order amount. So it says freight plus order amount. Of course, it could be a much bigger formula. It's just an example. Okay, so it's how you can build your own calculations into the Power Query. Now, everybody, the Power Query has its own functions as well, just like Excel does. Let me show you how you can find out the list of the functions. Come over here, click where it says Learn About Power Query Formulas. It's actually going to bring you to the Microsoft Help window on the internet. So just click on one of these categories of the functions, like I'll pick on date functions, and then you have many functions that you can explore. I mean, none of these are really available in Excel, or most of them are not. So I just gave you a whole new avenue to explore. Watch how we got to this window again. Go ahead and minimize the internet window, and we're back onto this screen. Go ahead and click on OK. And now you'll see we have the new total. Watch how we add a new calculation into the Power Query. I'm going to come up here and pick on Add Column, and then I'll pick on Custom Column. And now we're back onto this window. Let's call this one days. I want to see the number of days between the ship date and the order date. So double click on ship date right there. Double click. That puts that into the formula. Type in the minus sign and double click on order date. So it says ship date minus order date. Of course, it could be a much bigger formula. It's just an example. Now go ahead and click where it says Learn About Power Query Formulas. It'll bring you to that web page again. These are just the categories of the functions. So I'll pick on date functions, and you'll just see many, many functions that you can use within the Power Query. That should give you many ideas, or at least open up an avenue for you to go down where you can use the formulas to expand your data. Okay, that's pretty important. I'm going to put away the internet for right now. We're back onto this window, and I'll click on OK. And now we see the number of days. I don't really like the way that looks, so watch what I'll do. I'm going to right-click on the word days, right-click. I'll pick on Transform, and we'll just say, put it in the days format. So pick on days. That looks a lot better. All right. We'll see some more things, of course, as we go through the Power Query. So let's go ahead and save this one. Let's pick on the Home and pick on Close and Load. And now that's the way the Excel spreadsheet will look as well. So when people talk about the Power Query, it's really two parts. One is to import the data from the other sources, and the other is to manipulate the data like I've been showing you. So why don't we save this spreadsheet? So we're going to save it, and I'm going to call it Class 1. And I'll put mine on my Documents folder. And I did it before, so I'll just overwrite that. Good. Here's the website that we're going to go to. money.cnn.com/data/markets/DAO. Okay? money.cnn.com/data/markets.DAO. So if I scroll down, this is perfect data for this example. See how we have rows and columns of data. So that's what the data should look like in order to be able to be pulled into Excel. So now I'd like to highlight that website. I'm going to highlight the website name and copy it. And we'll see why. Let's go back into Excel now. Okay. Excuse me. Follow my screen. Pick on the data menu up top. Data. Now you should be able to pick on this icon. It should say from web. Import data from a web page. Pick on that, please. And we're just going to paste it into the screen. I'm going to right click on pick on paste. Otherwise you have to type it in and you have to get it exactly right. So I have money.cnn.com/data/markets/dow. I'm going to click on OK. The Power Query is trying to get to that web page and seeing if there's any meaningful data. Good. And then you go through these and see which one is the appropriate one. If I pick on document, that's not the right one. Pick on gainers. Okay. So then these are stocks that went up today. Pick on losers. These are ones that went down today. Table 0. Okay, so that's kind of like the entire stock market, the previous close and the open, and what was today's high and today's low. And then table 1, total volume, right? So you can see which one would be appropriate. Let's pick on gainers. Let's be positive. Now look down here, everybody. Before we did transform data, that brings you directly into the Power Query. If you pick on load, it just pulls all of the data directly into Excel. So let's pick on load. It's going to make a new sheet. And then let's see what's going up today. So CRM, Salesforce is always going up, of course, and then Merck, and then Nike. All right, so those are things that are going up today. And notice how, the table's called gainers, and I can use that within the Power Query, or because it made that into a formatted table, I'll be able to use that in the Power Pivot as well. Let's try that again. We can make another one on the same sheet. So I'm on cell A10. Pick on the data menu, and then pick on from web over here. I'm going to paste in that website again. Same thing. And I'll click on OK. It's going to try to reconnect to that page. And this time I'll pick on the losers. And then I'll pick on load. And then here comes the data. Let's see what went down today. Made that into a different sheet, actually. Home Depot, American Express, Honeywell, United Health, JP Morgan, Walmart. Wow. Is the stock market having a bad day today? These are big companies. Travelers, Johnson & Johnson, Coca-Cola went down today. Nothing really down by a lot. This went down 7 points, Home Depot. Anyway, that was a pretty interesting example. We were able to get the data directly from a web page. Not every web page works. It would have to be something with rows and columns of data like we saw. So there's a couple ways I can refresh the data. Go ahead and click on that table. Pick on the query menu up top, query. And I can pick on the word refresh there. Pick on the table design menu. And on the table design, I can pick on refresh there. Or let's go back to the data menu, data, and then I can pick on refresh there. In fact, if I pick on refresh right now, these numbers are going to change. These numbers are from the real stock market. They're changing all the time. Yeah, see how they changed, Okay, so that was pretty good. So now watch how, here's the window that's on that page. Here's how you can make it automatically refresh. Pick on refresh all over here. And then pick on connection properties. And then you'll see that window that's on that page. So notice how it says refresh every so many minutes. And you can change the number of minutes or refresh the data when opening up the file. That will allow it to refresh automatically, and then you'll have the newest, freshest data there at all times. So I'll click on OK. The way I got there was I picked on the data menu, and then I picked on refresh all, and then I said connection properties. and you see that window from which we could say refresh every so many minutes, or refresh the data when opening up the file, and that'll do an automatic refresh. If I pick the word refresh all again, those numbers will change again. I mean, these are live numbers coming directly from that web page. Okay, and the stock market is always changing. We know that. I'm done with class 1 now. So let's close class 1 and save it if you didn't save it before. I want to go to another blank workbook. So I'll pick on File and then New and then the blank workbook. All right, so I want to be in another blank workbook. This time, we're going to get all of the Excel data that were the formatted tables. Remember how I showed you at the beginning of the class? And then I want to follow these steps very closely so we can get this right. So I'm in the blank Excel workbook, and then let's all do this. Pick on the Data menu, pick on Get Data, From File, and I'll say From Workbook. Of course, you're going to use the student file again. So yours is probably in the download folder. I'll pick on the student file, and I'll pick on Import. All right, so here come the important steps. Pick over here where it says Select Multiple Items. That means you'll be able to pick more than one at the same time. And then it's just going to be these top ones. So pick on Category 7, Customer 6, Employees 5, New Shippers, Order Details, Orders 4, Products 3, Shippers 2, and Suppliers 1. I don't want you to pick on Load yet. So make sure you pick where it says Select Multiple Items, and then go right down the list. Category 7, Customer 6, Employees 5, New Shippers, Order Details, Orders 4, Products 3, Shippers 2, and Suppliers 1. Now, everybody follow my mouse, click on this pull down next to the word Load. Pick on the pull down, and then pick on the word Load 2. That'll give us another window. Okay, good. Make sure you pick in the word Table. That means it'll make a formatted table out of each one of those. Make sure you pick in the word New Worksheet. Each one will be its own sheet. And then make sure you pick where it says Add the data to the data model. If we add it to the data model, then the Power Pivot will be able to recognize that data as well. So on this screen, pick on the word Table, pick on the word New Worksheet, and we're going to add the data to the data model. Go ahead and click on OK. Now this will take about 30 seconds or maybe 60 seconds. You can see how it's pulling all of those in at the same time. All right, it's going to be here soon. Good. I don't care what sheet they're on. I really am not concerned about the sheets because notice how they're all over here on the right-hand side. Now let's save this one, everybody. So we're just going to save it. And what can I call it? So many names. Let's call it Class 2. All right, Class 2 will work. And again, I probably have that from the previous class. Good. All right. So now we'll be able to do a lot of things. We're going to use that data in the Power Query part and also in the Power Pivot part of the class. That's where we said add it to the data model. I want you to watch me, just watch me this time, and I'll include data from the different data sources just to show you an example. Now, I just saved Class 2. I'm actually going to open up a blank file in my case so I can keep them separate. So I'll do File, New, and then go to another blank workbook. All right, first, let's use an Access database. So I'll pick on the Data menu, Get Data, From Database, and then I'll say Microsoft Access Database. You're going to point to your Access database in your computer. There's an Access database. I'll pick on Import. It's trying to connect to the Access database. And then these are the tables and queries within that Access database. So I'll pick on either one of these. Now everybody, I'll pick on Load, and then that'll pull that data directly into Excel. And it makes it into a formatted table. as you can see. So it doesn't matter what the data source is. No, Jessica, you're just watching me for this one. I'm just showing you that the Power Query can work with other types of data. Okay, so you can just watch me. That's fine. So that was an Access database. That worked very well. Notice how I'll put it into a formatted table. Now, another one that's really popular is a SQL Server database. Let's try that one. Or you could just watch me, is what I meant to say. So I'll pick on Data, Get Data, From Database, and then we'll say SQL Server. Now, for these larger databases, you probably will need the help of your IT team. Notice how it's asking for the server name. All right, so now I'll get the server name. There's the server name. I'm just going to copy that, and I'll paste it in. So you probably would have to get the server name and the username and password, and maybe some other connection information from your IT team. I'm going to click on OK. It's going to try to connect to that server. These are the databases in that server. So again, your IT team would assist you with that. And I'll just pick one of these databases, and I'll pick on Load. And now that brought that directly into Excel. All right, so it can work with many different data sources. Now, another one that you should know about is a text file or a CSV file. Let's try something like that. I'll pick on Data, Get Data, From File, From Text, CSV. So either one of those would be the same path. And then you'll point to a text file on your computer. So I'll pick on Import. Now, a text file will have one additional step. You have to tell it what the delimiter is. So what separates each field. Usually it guesses properly. In this case, it guessed a comma. If you ever have a CSV file, which is a really popular format, then you'll make sure you pick on comma here. The C means comma. If you don't know which one it is, you can always try the different ones. So if I pick on colon, clearly that's not the right one. You'll know when you come across the right one. If I try semicolon, that's not the right one in this case, or space. None of those are correct. But as soon as I pick on comma, clearly, that's the right one. You'll always know when you get to the right one. If you ever have a CSV file, then it'll always be comma. But you can try the different ones until you find the right one, or usually it guesses for you properly. And then at that point, I pick on Load. And now that data is in my Excel spreadsheet, and notice how they all showed up over here in the Queries and Connections window. And all of those can be refreshed, and they can be brought into the Power Query and the Power Pivot and the whole thing, all right? So actually, we did 5 different data sources today. We did Excel, the website, Access, SQL Server, and the text file. All right, so just pick on Data, Get Data, and start to go through some of those categories. And you can see, it can work with many different data sources. Even Salesforce is in there now. And then if you go to other sources over here, these are 2 catch-all categories. Most databases are either ODBC compliant or OLEDB compliant. And those you will get the help with your IT team as well. All right. Now, I don't really need this workbook. It was just an example. So I'm going to go back to class 2. So I'll say File and Close. I really don't need that one for the rest of the day, so I'm not going to save that one. And we're back to class 2 now. Okay. Come over here to the right and pick on the new shippers table. Notice how the new shippers table only has record 4. Come over here to the right and pick on the shippers table, and that has records 1, 2, and 3. So an append query will take the records from those 2 tables and make one larger table out of that. Now the book is going to show you a different way to get here, but here's the way I would do it. I'll pick on the query menu up top, query, and then pick on the word append over here. Good. Okay. Usually it is going to be 2 tables. Once in a while, it might be 3 or more tables, but usually it's just 2. We have the shippers table. Come over here, and we'll pick on new shippers. All right. So we have shippers 2 and new shippers. Go ahead and click on OK. It'll actually bring you into the Power Query window. And notice how this one has all 4 of the records, which is what I want it to happen. Now let's give that a better table name. Come over here where it says append 1, and I'll call that one all shippers. And then we're done with that. So come over here and pick on close and load. And now we have a new table that's called all shippers, and it has all 4 of the records. So for that one, the tables have to have common fields. And then notice how we have the all shippers, which is the combination of the 2 other tables. So what we did was we picked on query and then append. The book is going to show you this way. The book would pick on data and then get data and then combine queries and then append there. All right, and it'll get you the same place. So with a group by, we'll be able to do subtotals within the query. So let's see where I want to go. I want to pull in another data source, another data set. So let's pick on the data menu, pick on get data, from file, and from the workbook again. Let's use that same Excel workbook. And I'll go back to my desktop and pick on the student file. Pick on import. I'm going to pick on orders for. Now, even though we did orders for before, we're going to do it a second time. So pick on orders for. I'm going to go directly into the Power Query. So pick on transform data. Now we're in the Power Query. Good. First of all, let's give this table a better name. So come over here where it says orders for version 2 and change this to say order totals. All right, I'm going to order totals this time. Notice how it has 830 records. If you look down here on the left, 830 individual orders. If you notice at the top of each column, we have the sort and filter that you would recognize from Excel. So click on the pull down for the customer ID, and I'll say sort ascending. Now we see there's multiple orders that have the same customer. This one has 6. This one has 4. This one has 6 or 7. What I want to do is I want to get a subtotal for each customer. That's exactly what the group by does. So let's pick on the word group by. And then you get this window. I do want to group it by the customer ID. That means each customer will be summarized down to 1 record. Let's call the new column, let's call it new total. New total, good. Now for the operation, we'll do a sum. All right, sum is good. And then come over here and choose order amount. So I have the customer ID here. I'm going to call it new total. We're going to do a sum, and here I have order amount. So what am I asking for? I'm saying for each different customer, add up all the orders. Before I click on OK, notice how we have 830 records. So I'll click on OK. Now we have 89 records, right? And then go ahead and click on the pull down for the customer ID, and I'll pick on sort. Remember how this person had like 6 records or something? Now it summarized them down to 1 sum, and it did that for each customer. I really like that group by. It allows you to do subtotals right within your Power Query. Pretty good. Make sure it's called order totals over here, and then we'll save it. So we'll say close and load. That's going to bring that into Excel. Notice that's the exact way that it looks. And then we have a new one that's called order totals. All right. Let's call it a group by. All right. Come over here and pick on the products table. And notice how the products table has everything about the product. It has the supplier ID, but that's the only information it has from the supplier. And then if you notice, the last field on the products table is called discontinued. Now come over here and pick on the suppliers table, and then we see all the information about the supplier. And notice how it has the common field supplier ID. So the merge is going to merge both of those together into one large table. Pick on the, we're going to start with the products table. So pick on products table over here. And then this is the way I would do it. I'll come up here and pick on query, and then I'll pick on merge. Query, and then merge. Good. It already has the products table there. We'll pick another table. So come over here and pick on suppliers. Now you want to tell it what the common field is. So I'll pick on supplier ID here, and I'll pick on supplier ID here. So we just told it what the common field is. In real life, it doesn't have to have the same field name. It's always nice when it does have the same field name, but it doesn't always work out that way in real life. As long as the data is the same, that's more important. Okay? Now come down here and click on this pull down. If you know anything about relational database, then this can make a difference for you. The ones that people use all the time are left outer join, right outer join, and inner join. Those could give you different results if you do it in real life. If you don't know anything about that, just use the one that it gave you. But sometimes those could give you different results. Go ahead and click on OK. It's going to open up the Power Query window. Now, remember how the last column in the products table used to be the discontinued field, right? Here we see discontinued. Now come over here. You see, you have to do one more step here. Click on that little icon to the right of the suppliers right there. And then you could pick it. You could pick and choose the fields if you wanted to. We're just going to say select all columns and then click on OK. And now all of those other fields from the suppliers table have been merged into the products table. It knows which supplier goes with which product because of the common field of that relationship. Okay, so we're actually getting into some relational database concepts here. When we get into the Power Pivot in a few minutes, we'll really hit the relational database concepts there as well. Let's give this a better table name. So you see where it says merge one. Let's call this one products and suppliers. Make sure you pick on close and load, of course. And now we'll have a new table that's called products and suppliers, which is a merge of those two. All right, that was a pretty good one. It joined it on the common field supplier ID. All right, let's do some more formulas. I want to show you one that I showed you before because I think it's just really worth our time. So come over here to the employees table. For the employees table, I have that birth date. Watch again how we're going to calculate that age in the Power Query. So I'm going to right click on the employees table and I'll pick on edit. Now at this point, everybody, we should be back into the Power Query window. So let's see. I want you to click on the birth date column. Now think about what I want to do. I want to add a new column from the birth date. So pick on the word add column at the top. Good. Now pick on the word date here. It knows that that's a date field. So pick on the word date and then pick on the word age. So it added a new column that's called age. Now it gives it to you in the number of days. Well, this time I really want the number of years, right? So go ahead and right click where it says age. Pick in the word transform and we'll pick on total years. So now it's the number of years. Of course, we want to round that one down. So I'm going to right click where it says age, pick on transform, pick in the word round, and I'm going to say round down. And now we have the age pretty quickly. A normal Excel spreadsheet, the formula would be pretty complicated to make the age. Here, it's built right in. So I really like that one. I want to show you that one again. That's all I really want to do on the employees table. So let's close that window. I'll pick on home and then close and load. All right, so I like that age one. Let's see some other calculations I'd like to do. So go over to the order details table. I like to take the unit price and multiply it by the quantity to get the line total. So this will be one of those custom calculations. I'm going to right click on order details and I'll pick on edit. Good. And we're back into the Power Query. So remember an earlier page showed us how to make a new column. So I'm going to pick on add column up here at the top. And then we'll do, if you want your own formula, you say custom column. And that's really what that page was referring to, page 33, I think it was. So here you can make your own formula. Let's call this one line total. Double click on the word unit price, double click, and that'll put that into the formula. Type in the asterisk and double click on the word quantity. So we have unit price times the quantity. Okay. Now remember, you can make that a much more complicated formula. Remember, you can click down here and then it'll bring you to that website which shows you all those other functions. And then you can really start to make it more complicated from there. All right, so that gives you a whole new avenue to explore. Anyway, I have the unit price times the quantity. Go ahead and click on OK. And now we have the line total. All right, it's a good example of making a calculation. Now, if you wanted to see that calculation again, watch where my mouse is going to go. See where it says added column right there? Pick on this settings wheel, and then you'll see the actual formula, the formula screen once again. So that's where you can change it. Let's go ahead and pick on cancel if you did that. And let's do a save and close. Or a close and load, I mean. I'll do home and then close and load. We'll just spend a couple more minutes here in the Power Query. And the Power Pivot's coming up very soon. And now we have that line total. Let's see what else I would like to do. Oh, let's make a change in the products table. So come over here to the right click on the word products, and I'll pick on edit, and we're back into the Power Query. I want to show you a new way to make a column. So notice over here, everybody, if I scroll over, I have the units in stock, the reorder level, and whether it's discontinued or not. So I want to determine if a product needs to be reordered. Follow my screen. Come up here and pick on Add Column, and then pick on the word Conditional Column. Add Column, and then Conditional Column. And then you get this kind of screen. It's a new way to make an if statement, all right? So let's call this new column Reorder. And I want to determine if a product needs to be reordered or not. So come over here where it says column name, click on the pull down. I'm going to say if the units in stock, instead of equals, choose is greater than or equal to, and pick on this ABC 1, 2, 3. Because you can compare it to a value or you can compare it to a column. So let's say select a column and then click on this pull down and we'll say the reorder level. If the units in stock is greater than or equal to the reorder level, then it doesn't have to be reordered. So come over here and say no. We're going to add a clause, almost like a nested if. I'll pick on add a clause. Now, if it's discontinued, I don't have to reorder it. So we're going to say else if the discontinued equals true, that means it is discontinued, so I don't have to reorder that. So come over here and type in no. And then come down here and type in yes. So here's what it should say. If units in stock is greater than or equal to the reorder level, that means we have enough and we don't have to reorder it, so no. Else, if the discontinued equals true, that means it is discontinued, so I don't have to reorder that. Say no there. Otherwise, yes. So it's kind of an interesting way to make an if. This is called a conditional column. Come over here and click on OK. The second one says yes. Let's see if the logic fits. The units in stock is 17. The reorder level is 25, so we need to order it, and it's not discontinued, so that is correct. We need to order that product. That was pretty good. So when you want to add your own calculation here, you can say custom column like we did a few times today, or that one was called a conditional column. Hopefully you got some ideas of how to work with the Power Query today. Let's go ahead and pick on Close and Load, and now that's the way the Excel spreadsheet would appear as well. And then when your mouse comes back, I'm sure that extra field is now there. Yeah, see how we have the reorder field now. And go ahead and save your Class 2 workbook. Click on Save. Notice how mine says the word Power Pivot up there in the menu bar. So I want yours to say that as well. So here's what you do. You come over here and you pick on File. And then under File, you pick on Options. File and then Options. On this window, pick in the word Advanced. I'm sorry, pick in the word Add-ins is what I meant to say. Pick in the word Add-ins right there. Good. Now come down here where it says Manage and click on that pull down. And we're going to say COM Add-ins, which is Common Add-ins, all right? COM Add-ins. And then you pick on the word Go. And then you're on this window. And then you make sure over here, you click where it says Microsoft Power Pivot for Excel. So we picked on File and then Options. From there we picked on Add-ins. From there we picked on COM Add-ins. And then Go. And make sure it is checked where it says Microsoft Power Pivot for Excel. Go ahead and click on OK. And that window, by the way, and those steps are on page 39. Now usually that'll turn on the Power Pivot menu up top there. If that doesn't do it, let's do one more step. I'll pick on File and then Options. File and then Options. Pick on the word Customize Ribbon over here. Customize Ribbon. Now the word, remember how the word ribbon is really the new word for the new toolbar? Now come over here to the right, scroll down, and make sure the word Power Pivot is checked there. So I picked on File and then Options, Customize Ribbon, and make sure the word Power Pivot is checked there. And then click on OK. And now the Power Pivot menu should definitely be up there. We're going back into Excel now, everybody. We should be on the Class 2 workbook, like I'm on Class 2. All right. So let's pick on the Power Pivot menu up top. Of course, that's the one that we just turned on, right? Power Pivot. And then pick on the word Manage over here on the left-hand side. Good. Okay, so first of all, notice down here, you have all those different tabs. Remember how when we pulled the data in from the Excel spreadsheet, we said add it to the data model? Well, that's all these sheets down here. Once it's part of the data model, then the Power Pivot will be able to access that data. So that's, you see all those tables. What does that really mean? That means any one of those or all of those can be used in the actual pivot table for the Power Pivot. Now, notice how the sheets are in alphabetical order when you first look at this. Let's go to the category sheet if you're not already there. Now, I can't change the data here. If I pick on the word dairy products there, I can't type in anything there. So what you would do is you would update the original data source, whatever that might be, and then you pick on the word refresh here, and then the Power Pivot would refresh. So I can't change the data here. You would change it in the original data source, and you pick on the word refresh, and then the new data would be here as well. So the book for the next couple pages are going to show you these different menus. Let's go to the home menu, which is where we'll be staying for the rest of the class. So the home menu has like copy and paste. Now look at these choices over here. The book will have a few pages about this coming up. This is where you can pull the data directly into the Power Pivot. So we're going to try something like that. Here's that refresh. In a couple minutes, we will make the pivot table, from this screen. That's the whole point of what we're doing. Over here, I can do some formatting. All right, see your classic formatting, sort and filter we know about from normal Excel. fine, we know from a normal Excel. Now, what we're looking at here, this is called the data view. All right, so you see the actual data. On the other hand, come over here and pick on diagram view. Okay, so this is where we're going to join our tables together. We're going to get to this window in a few minutes from now. So almost like Access or SQL Server or lots of other databases, this is where we're going to join the tables together on the common fields. So we'll come back to that. That's called diagram view. Let's go back to the data view. And we see the actual information there. And then notice how the different tabs are the different tables within the data model. That was the home menu. Let's come up here and pick on the design menu. And then here's one way to add a function into the Power Pivot. We'll see another way pretty soon. So I can add the functions there. Here you can manage the relationships, although we'll do it from the home menu. So just different features here. And then on the advanced tab, there's some more items there as well. And the book will show you each of those different menus on the page that's coming up. Let's go back to the home menu. Good. Okay. Everybody pick on the home tab of your Power Pivot screen and notice how it says pivot table right here. So pick on pivot table. Then you can use one of these templates. You could just make the pivot table or the pivot chart, or you could do a chart and the table. You could do 2 charts or 4 charts. So you can always try those later on. Let's try the pivot table. All right. I'm going to put the pivot table on a new worksheet of the Class 2 workbook. So pick on New Worksheet, and I'll click on OK. Now, I'm on sheet 23. It doesn't matter what sheet that you're on. It really doesn't matter. It looks like a normal pivot table, right? Except for one big change. Come way over here and notice the word all there and click on the word all. Now I'll be able to make the pivot table from the multiple tables. That's kind of the big feature, in my opinion, of the pivot of the Power Pivot. Now I want to show you something. Maybe this is happening for you as well. Notice how I have 2 tables that are called categories and 2 that are called customers. We're going to use the one with the orange cylinder, and that means it's part of the data model. Okay? So when we use the customers table or any of these other tables, we'll use the ones with the orange cylinder so that it'll be the one that's part of the data model. The other one that says customers, it's really just a sheet, the actual formatted table that's part of the Excel workbook, but this is the one that's part of the data model. So in fact, let's expand the customers table, the one with the orange cylinder there, and pick up company name and drag it down here into the rows. Good. So, you know, a lot of it's like a normal pivot table. Let's see a really big benefit of the Power Pivot right now. I can include fields from other tables. So come over here to the right, let's scroll down. And let's use the orders for table. Again, the one with the orange cylinder. So I'm going to expand the orders for. These are the fields from the orders table. Go ahead and scroll down on those fields. And let's use order amount. Pick up order amount and drag it down here into the values. Notice how it has all of the same number, right? Right now, it doesn't know which order goes with which customer. So every time we bring in a new table into the Power Pivot, we have to create a relationship. So come over here. This is one way to manage the relationships. Pretty soon we'll see another way. So pick on the word create. You get this window. So pick on the pull down where it says table. Now we're going to use the ones up at the top here, the ones that are part of the data model. So I'll use the orders for. Come over here to the right and we'll pick on customer ID. Go to the next row where it says related table. Now I'll use the customers table or customer 6. Now, and then I pick the customer ID field. So it should say orders for customer ID. and customer 6 and customer ID. When you do this in real life, mine does not show the data model. That's okay, Jessica. Just choose the one that you have there. It'll be fine. I think that happened on a newer version of Excel. So just pick the one that you have. It's fine. That's kind of a recent addition. All right. So we should pick on orders here, and then customer ID, and then customer 6 and customer ID. When you do it in real life, they don't have to have the same field name. It's always nice when they do have the same field name, but they don't have to. As long as the data is the same, that's more important. Go ahead and click on OK. Now the numbers changed because now it knows which orders go with which customers. This field came from the customers table. This field came from the orders table. It knows which order goes with which customers because of that relationship. So now Excel becomes a relational database, a lot like Access already is. Everybody, here's how you can manage that relationship. So click on the pivot table over here on the left. Pick on Pivot Table Analyze, or just the word Analyze up there at the top. And then pick on the word Relationships here. Pick on Relationships. Okay. Now we probably only have one so far. So click on that one and pick on the word Edit. So instead of Order Details, I want you to choose the Orders For table. So
I have 2 Orders For table.
Okay, good. You have 2 Orders For.
And I had one of them.
Okay, so pick the other one.
Okay.
And then pick on Customer ID over here. And then let's see if that's better now. Click on OK. And then click on the word Close. Do you have different numbers now?
No.
Okay, so that means we'll pick a different customers table. I know it gets confusing because one is like the formatted table and one's part of the data model. In the newer version of Excel, they made it more clear. So let's try that again. Pick on the relationships and pick on the word Edit again.
Mm-hmm.
So let's pick on the different customers table now. So click on this pull down. And do you have a second customers table?
Yes.
Pick on the second one and then pick on customer ID there. And then click on OK. And then click on Close.
Nope.
Still different, still the same, huh? I'm not sure why. Well, we have one more combination that we can do. Pick on the word relationships again. Pick on the word Edit again. Now go back.
I got the right combination.
Okay, good, right? So you were thinking the way I was thinking. Okay, excellent. So I know that can be confusing right there, everybody, because one of those is the formatted table that's on the Excel spreadsheet, and one of them is part of the data model. So these days, at least they made it more clear, but I know maybe a couple versions of Excel, it wasn't so clear. But I'm glad you got that. So we saw one way to make the relationships is over here on the Pivot Table Analyze menu. Let me show you the other way to manage the relationships, which will probably make it more clear, and we'll go back into the Power Pivot. So pick on the word Power Pivot up top. By the way, why don't we go ahead and save that? It was a lot of work. So pick on Save, please. Good. Pick on the Power Pivot menu.
Tom?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I noted a question in the chat. I just wanted to ask for clarity. The issue in the past example was that the data model is identified by that little orange icon noted, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So in other words, everybody, if you look over here on the tables, notice how I have 2 categories tables, and maybe you do as well. So the one with the orange cylinder is the one that's going to be part of the data model. Is that more clear for you? Okay. Yeah, gotcha, right? So now let's see another way to manage the relationships, everybody. Pick on the Power Pivot menu up top and come over here and pick on the word Manage again. And now we're back onto the Power Pivot screen. Remember how this view is called the data view. So come over here to the right and pick on the diagram view. Now we're going to use this window to actually join the rest of our tables together. They actually show the tables in alphabetical order when you first look at this screen, but you can move them around. So let's pick up categories over here and drag it to the right, kind of towards the middle over here. All right, that'll be fine. So let me make sure we have good connections here. So we'll go with the customers table. Let's scroll to the right so I can see the employees table. So I want to see the employees table over here on the left and the orders table over here on the right. Those two tables are joined by the employee ID field. So look at my screen. From the employees table, get the employee ID field and drag it to the employee ID of the orders table. So it's similar to the way you make the relationships maybe in Access or SQL Server or something like that. I like the way it redraws those lines so that it doesn't really cross over each other. That's a new feature. So we have customers, we have employees. I'm not worried about new shippers. Remember how we already dealt with the new shippers table earlier. So I'm not even concerned about that one. Let's keep on going to the right now. Okay. The order details will be joined to the orders table on the order ID field. So pick up order ID from order details and drag it to the order ID of the orders table. And now those two are joined together. Let's go back to the right now. Okay. This is why I brought the categories table over here. From the categories table, pick up the category ID and drag it to the category ID of the products table. So it doesn't have to be the same field name, although it's always helpful when it is the same field name. As long as the data is the same, that's more important. For example, here we have the shippers table. Let's make another one to the products table first. So go back to the order details. And on the order details, I have a field that's called product ID. Pick up product ID from the order details and drag it to the product ID of the products table. It's kind of at the top there. And then those two are connected. Good. Now I'm going to scroll to the right again. Okay. Scroll down on the orders table so I can see a field that's called ship via. There it is. It's about halfway down on the orders table. Pick up ship via from the orders table and drag it to the shipper ID of the shippers table. So this is one of those where the field name does not have to be the same. As long as the data is the same, that's more important. And then we have one more. That's good. So go over to the right. And then the suppliers table is going to be joined to the products table on the supplier ID. So pick up supplier ID from the suppliers table and drag it into the supplier ID of the products table. And now that one is joined in as well. You try to find at least one match for your different tables. They're never all going to be joined to each other. It just doesn't happen, and it would never happen. But as long as each table is joined to one other table, then you're in good shape. Then I can start to use all of those different tables in the actual Power Pivot table. I'm not concerned about new shippers. Remember how we merged that into the other table during the Power Query step. So that one's fine. Now look at my screen for a second. If you want to see an overall view of this, I can zoom out. So come over here at the bottom and I'll pick on this minus sign and notice how I can zoom out until I get the larger picture. Okay? Good. So any questions about that screen? Notice how I'm always trying to find the common fields. What does all this really mean? Well, now we can include all of these different tables into the pivot table. Go ahead and save that. That was a lot of work. So pick on save, please. Let's go ahead and close this particular window. Close this window. And I'm back into the normal pivot table, as you can see. Now, let's start to see some other things I can do within the Power Pivot. This next one can be included in the normal pivot table as well. It's called a slicer, but the Power Pivot takes it a little bit further. Slicer is a new way to do a filter. So come up here and pick on the Pivot Table Analyze menu. Then come over here and pick on Insert Slicer. Your slicers are, they come from your fields, okay? Now you see where it says active? Those are the fields that are already, those are the tables that we've already included in the pivot table. But then let's pick on all, and then we can get to all of our other ones as well. So scroll down until you can see one that's called shippers. Okay, you can see mine has the orange cylinder, but just pick the first one that says shippers. It should be okay. And I'll choose company name, and I'll click on OK. There's your slicer. So if I pick on federal shipping, in my case, the numbers are changing because it knows which shippers goes with which orders because of that relationship. Now, if your numbers are not changing, then you can click on one of those numbers, and then you'll get that yellow window over here where you can make that other relationship. Maybe we choose the other shippers table. I know it gets kind of confusing, but they actually did improve it recently with the ones that are part of the data model. Now they're clearly marked, okay? But wasn't that interesting how we added a slicer? Now we have 3 tables on the screen. This field came from the customers table, this field came from the orders table, and this came from the shippers table. It knows which goes with which because of all those relationships. So you can see those relationships are pretty powerful. So think about what we've done. We pulled in all of the data using the Power Query from different data sources. And then we were able to pull those into the Power Pivot, from which we can make a pivot table out of all those different tables. It doesn't matter where they come from. I mean, that's pretty powerful to me. It really is. Now let's click on this X over here and get all their records back again. Another great, now once you add the slicer into here, all of a sudden Microsoft will call this a dashboard. So if you heard the word dashboard, it probably includes one of those slicers. Another feature that we can add into the pivot table or the Power Pivot is called a timeline. Let's try that one. So click on the pivot table, pick on the Pivot Table Analyze menu, come over here and pick on Insert Timeline. A timeline is a slicer that's based on a date field. So pick on Order Date and click on OK. Here's the timeline. Right now it's organized by month. Come over here and pick on the word month. And then I can organize it by years. And now it's organized by year. Pick on 1998, and now the data is changing again. So that's a great feature that you can add to a normal pivot table, or here we did it in the Power Pivot. So the timeline is just a slicer that's based on a date field, so we could do a date range. Let's get all the records back there. So let's click on this X, and all the records are back again. So the timeline is another component of the dashboard, if you heard that word before. I just wanted to show you those windows. We don't really need those windows for right now. So let's click on Order Date and then delete that with your delete key, and then pick on Company Name and delete that. Let me show you some of the benefits that are only available in the Power Pivot. I want to show this report, by year. So what we'll do is come over here to the right, scroll down, and use the same orders table that you used before. Like I'm going to use this orders table. Use the one that you used before for that other field. And pick up Order Date and drag it into the columns. Now when I did it on mine, then it did come up by year. Okay? So if yours didn't come up by year, maybe it's by month or by date, then watch what I want to do. Go ahead and right click on your month or your date or your year, whatever you have. I'm going to right click on the year and then pick on the word group. So this is all things that we could do in a normal pivot table, but I want to show you something special. So make it so the word year is the only one chosen. See how I have the word year? And click on OK. And now we have it broken down by year. Okay. I want to show you something that's called a set. Come over here to the right, and using the orders table again, let's use the freight field. Pick up freight and drag it into the values. So for each year, I have the order amount and the freight. You see that for each year. Well, here's been a common request over the years. People would say, well, I just want to show the freight for this year and the order amount for this year. Is there a way we can do that? Well, that's what the sets are. Watch my screen. So come up here and pick on Pivot Table Analyze. Pick on Fields, Items, and Sets like we did before. Now, in the normal pivot table, these ones were lit up, right? And now the sets are lit up. So let's do a set based on the column items. Pick that, please. Now look what we can do. So maybe for 1998, I want to show the freight, but not the order amount. So I'll pick on the row that says 1998 for the order amount, and I'll say delete row. For 1999, I want to show the order amount and not the freight. So I'll pick on 1999 for the freight and delete that row. That's what the sets are all about. So I think they're only available when we get into the Power Pivot. Come over here and click on OK. Yup. See how 1998 shows the freight and 1999 shows the order amount. You can pick and choose which ones that you'd like to choose. So we did fields, items, and sets. You can make it on the rows or on the columns. It doesn't have to be dates. It's just a common example that people look for, but it could be whatever is in the columns and the rows. And now we know what a set is, okay? As far as I know, that's only available in the Power Pivot. Let's remove that set. So come over here and pick on set 1 and move it back up to the top. It's just by the customer right now, but we're going to do some more things with this pivot table pretty soon. So go ahead and save your work at this time. And I'm going to go to the Power Pivot menu again. And over here, I'll pick on Manage. And now we're back into the Power Pivot window. Good. This is the data view. I'm going to pick on the Home menu. If I say From Database, then I can use SQL Server or Access, right? If I want to see more data types, I'm going to say From Other Sources. And then this window is in the book a few times. I could use SQL Server, Azure, Microsoft Analytics, Microsoft Access, Oracle, and then a bunch more. Here's a catch-all category with the ODBC and OLEDB. Even Excel and text files are in there. So just watch me. I'll use an Access database like the page talks about. Access, and I'll pick on Next. I'm going to point to my Access database. So I'll pick on Browse, and I'll use the same one I used earlier. Pick on Open. Now that could have a username and password, and you would type that in there. So I'll pick on Next. I want to select the list from the tables and the views. If you use this one, you actually have to write the SQL code, which some of you might know, but usually I'll just do the tables and the queries. Pick on Next. Here is the tables from that database. Now I'm going to use the employees table. I have employees 5 down here. It'll just make another table called employees over here. When we pull the data directly into the Power Pivot like I'm showing you, it makes it automatically part of the data model. So I'll choose employees. Of course, I could have even chosen more than one of this, and I'll pick on Finish. And then it did have success, and I'll pick on Close. Notice how I have a new tab that's called Employees, right? Don't worry if you don't have it, of course. So that was an Access database. Now let me try a SQL Server database. So I'll say From Other Sources again, and I'll try SQL Server. Pick on next. This is where I need that server name. I'm going to get the server name. Now let's go back into the Power Query, or the Power Pivot, I mean. So watch again. I'm in the Power Pivot window, and I'll pick on From Other Sources, SQL Server, Next, and I'll paste in that server name. Good. Now here, I could use a username and password, and here I need a database name as well. So you'll get this information from your IT team. Any one of these would work. I'll pick the list from the tables. If you use this one, you have to know the actual SQL code. So I'll pick on Next. Here is the tables from that database. I can choose one or more of those. And then I'll pick on Finish. And now that is in the Power Pivot. If I pick on Close, notice how I have the new tab down there, which means it's automatically part of the data model. Now I want to go to the spreadsheet part. So I'm back onto the Class 2 workbook, and I'm on the pivot table part of the Power Pivot. Let's pick on the Power Pivot menu. Notice how we haven't used the measures or the KPIs. So a measure is a way to add a formula here into the Power Pivot. And when you go into the measures, you'll find some functions that you haven't seen before. Let's say for each of these different customers, I want to show the first time that they made an order. So let's do a measure. Just think about a measure as a new formula. So pick on measure and then do a new measure. Okay. Now come over here on the table name and we'll use the orders for table. Hopefully you just have one there. We'll use orders for. Now for the measure name, I'll call this the new, I'll call this the first order date. The description is optional. Now come over here and pick on the FX and you'll see some functions that you haven't seen before. If I scroll down, I mean, right away you'll see some that you haven't seen before. So for each one of those, you can click on it and then read the description or get further help with a question mark. So scroll down and find one that's called first date. Okay, first date, which really means the earliest order date in this case for each customer. So I'll click on OK. Now click inside of that parentheses and type in O, and it'll start to show you the fields that start with O. And I want to use orders for order date. Make sure it says orders for order date. Oh, I want the one, yeah, orders for order date is correct. And then pick on OK. Oh, I missed it. I should have double clicked on that. So I'll try that again. I'll type in O there. I'll double click where it says orders for order date. That's better. And then close the parentheses. So it should say equals first date, open parentheses, orders for order date, close parentheses. Of course, it could be a much bigger formula. It's just an example here. So pick on the word date for the category, and we'll use date format. I'll click on OK. Now we have the first order date for each different customer. Watch how we did one of those measures. It's a way to add a new calculation into your Power Pivot. So I'll pick on measure and then new measure again. This one's still going to come from the orders for table. Let's call this one the most recent order date. The description is optional. Let's click on this FX. And again, you'll just find some that you haven't seen before. So scroll down and try one that's called last date. All right, double click on last date. Click inside of that parentheses. Type in O. And then use orders for and order date. Okay, good. And then close that parentheses. So it says equals last date, open parentheses, orders for, order date, close parentheses. And again, I'll make it in date format. Click on OK. So my point with the measures is you have even more functions to explore and new ways to do calculations in your pivot table or in the Power Pivot, okay? Now, notice how there's one over here that's called KPI, which you haven't used yet. KPI means Key Performance Indicator. Well, it's a new kind of visual tool, but in order to make a KPI, you have to make a measure first. So let's make another measure. Pick on measures again, and then new measure. It's still going to come from the orders for table. Let's call it a new sum. Now this one we'll just type it in. So after the equal sign, I'll just type in the sum. You know, there's normal calculations in there as well. Open parentheses. Just scroll down until we can see the orders table. And then I'll use the, let's see, the order amount. I want orders for order amount. Double click on that and close the parentheses. So it's going to say equals sum, open parentheses, orders for, order amount, close parentheses. And we'll pick on currency. I'll click on OK. I had to make that into a measure so then I can make a KPI from there. Let's see what a KPI is. Pick on KPI and then new KPI. It means Key Performance Indicator. It's going to be a visual tool here. Okay. Click on this pull down. See how it has to come from a measure. So let's use the new sum. Now you could base it on another measure, but in this case we'll use the absolute value. So type in 20,000 here. Instead of 100, type in 20,000 and then hit the enter key. And that's going to reset this scale. So move this triangle over to 5,000 and move this one over to 20,000. So this means that 5,000 and below will be red, between 5 and 15 will be yellow, and above 20 will be green. That's what that example means, okay? Go ahead and click on OK. Now the KPI is kind of funny the way it works. See how it has -1 here and +1? Well, watch what you're going to do. Come back to your fields and go back to the original orders table where we use the other fields. Oh, there it is. So I'll get the orders table. Scroll down. And then there's the KPI at the bottom. Okay. So go ahead and expand the word new sum. I don't know why this works, but it does. I'm going to uncheck the word status and check it again. And now there's the KPI. So what do we say? Red is 5,000 or below, yellow is between 5 and 20,000, and green is above 20,000. So we have a new visual tool here in the Power Pivot that's called the KPI. Let's do one more measure and then one more KPI and we'll be done. So let's do a measure and then a new measure. I'm going to call this the new count. And we'll just type this one in. So after the equal sign, I'll type in count, open parentheses. Again, scroll down until we can see the orders for table, and I'll double click on orders for order ID and close the parentheses. So I have equals count, open parentheses, orders for, order ID, close parentheses. And I'll click on OK. There's the measure, right? Let's make a KPI from there. So I'll pick on KPI, new KPI. This one is going to come from the new count. We could compare it to another measure, but we're just going to use an absolute value this time. So instead of 100, type in 20, and then press the enter key so that it resets the scale. I'm going to move this triangle to 5, and I'll move this one to 20. Go ahead and click on OK. It shows up as -1 and 0 and +1. Watch what you're going to do. You're going to come over here to your fields and scroll down. There's the new count. I'm going to expand it. Logically, in my mind, this shouldn't work, but it does. I'm going to uncheck status and check it again. And there is the KPI. So in the Power Pivot, we were able to make the pivot table for multiple tables using those relationships. Then I showed you those sets. We talked about joining the tables together. And then I showed you these different options on the Power Pivot menu.